Hello guys, in this lesson I'm going to show you how to do code first using ASP.NET Core Web App, and hopefully it's going to be pretty quick and I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm going to also use some code snippets to speed up the process. So let's go ahead and start. Okay, we pick .NET Core and then let's give it a name. I'm going to create a code first for the library management system, so I'm going to just say LMS. And it's going to be my web, MVC, and .NET Core 5.0. I'll just say create, and it's going to create a project for me. Okay. Okay. We got the project. So the first thing is, first I'm going to create some models. Okay. Let's see. Oh, add new class, and I'm going to call it book, and so my book class will have this. So basically these are, I got ID, title, barcode, publisher, these properties. And the next thing is I want to have my user class. So I'm going to create the user class, and I'll just call it user, say add, and also I'm going to create a student class, a library. So here we go, where I have a loan class, I have a book class, and I have a student class which inherits from the user. Here's my user class, has a first name, last name, and date of birth and email, and it also has a list of books. Well, this is not a good idea if you're doing code first, so I'm going to just remove it. Okay, so these classes I got. Now next thing is we need to install code first libraries. So we go to tools, NuGet package manager, and then manage package, and we're going to install, we're going to search for Entity Framework Core, and we're going to install this in our LMS web project. So install, accept, and next we install Core SQL Server, install, and the next thing what we need is core design. So that is core design, this one, install, accept, done. And also we need tools. Okay, install, accept, and it's done. So I have these 4 libraries installed. Okay, and the next thing is we want to create context. So I'll just create a separate folder for that. I will say context, and inside I will create a class, and I'll give it a name, my DB context. Okay, so let's make this capital. Say add. This is my class, and it will inherit from DB context. DB context. Okay. Well, it doesn't know it, so we're going to reference our entity framework core. Okay, now it knows about DB context. And the next thing is I'm going to add my books, stuff, and students DB sets. Okay, so it doesn't know book, and I'm going to include this reference. Well, I don't have a stuff, but instead I have loan. So I'm going to add a loan. It's going to be a loan. Okay. Good. And the next thing is we want to create our MyDB context constructor. So it will look like this. Okay. And the next thing is we want to configure our configuration method. We're going to create that. Okay. This is our method for configuring, and also needs more curly braces like this. Okay. And my DB context, it doesn't know about the I put triple B instead, it should be double B. Okay, now it's all good. So here in this line we need to give our connection string. Okay, so that is done like this: option builder dot use SQL server, and then we need a connection string here. Okay, so how do we get that? We'll create our SQL database first. So to do that, we need to go to SQL Server Explorer, and then there's a data connection. You can right click on it and say create new SQL database, and for the local database we can just put dot. You don't need any username or password. We'll use Windows authentication, and the database name would be, let's call it, since I have already created LMS before and tried it, I'll just create this time LMS2. So this will be my database name. I'll just say OK, and it's supposed to create another database for me. And now next thing is I can just go to properties, and from the properties I can pull connection string, Control C, get the connection string, copy paste it here. Okay. So I think we're pretty much ready. I will try. If it doesn't work, I will go ahead and do other settings. So just let's open up our NuGet Package Manager console, right, this one, and I'm going to add migration, and let's call it initial create, and let's see what happens. Okay, go ahead, create, please. Again, it says build succeeded, but it's unable to create MyDB context for different patterns supported design, blah 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 blah. So let's see what happens, what needs to be changed. So I opened up startup.cs, which is this one, and I'm going to add my connection string here, and I'm going to add my context into the services, and also I added to my app settings, which is in JSON, my connection string. Okay, so it pulls this connection string from here and here. Okay, gets it from this, and it's called my LMS database. Yeah. So now I'll try again and see what happens. Oh wow. This time I got different error. It says book authors could not be mapped. What authors? I don't have any authors. So let's check that. Where do I have authors? Well, yes, I do have authors here. So this is not a good thing to have a list here because, well, this probably this code first generator it doesn't know what to do with this list because it's neither a table or nothing. It's just a list that's pointing to some kind of string. It's a list of string of authors, so it doesn't know how to map it, I guess. So that is why it didn't do it. It didn't create migration. So I just commented that out, and probably once I create my models like a book or something, my authors will be in a separate table. I'm going to create the authors table, and I'm going to just connect it through the foreign key. Okay, so this is not a good idea to have a list of string authors. So let's go ahead and try another shot, see what happens, and voila, it worked. So now I have my migration and I'm happy. So I got my bucks, I got the user, I got the loan, and it has foreign keys in place, and it even has a ID, primary key. Yeah, well, great. Now next thing is what we need to do is we need to update our database. So to do that we'll just say update database, and it needs to update database. Okay, done. So if we go ahead and check our server LMS2 tables, you will see that there are books, loan, and user tables. Okay, so we're good. The next thing is now we can go ahead and create our repository files, and we can create our MVC controllers and views. Okay, and then try to add some value to our table, some data, and then pull some data from our table. Okay, so let's close these all. To do that, I'm going to create a separate folder, and I'll just name it repository. So I'm going to use a repository pattern for that, right? So and add a new class. Well, actually it's going to be an interface, and I'm going to say iRepository. Okay, so add, and also I'm going to create my repository class. It's going to be a repository like this. Okay, great. So my repository will have these entities. Okay, so I'm going to use a generic iRepository interface, and I'm going to implement this interface. Okay, so my interface has IEnumerable get all, so which is for getting all the data, and this will enable me to get as queryable, and this will enable me to get my data with by ID, and these are insert, update, and delete methods. Okay, so in my repository I'm going to implement that, and let's go to the repository, and I'll just copy and paste this my snippets. There you go. So it's going to have my DB context and the DB set entities. It doesn't know about this, so as soon as I include entity framework core, now it knows it. My DB context is in my context there, and this one is supposed to be my DB context. Okay, so we implemented this interface of iRepository So we're inheriting from this interface, yeah, and then implementing it here. Okay, and where the T is a base entity. Okay, so base entity, what we got is here, which is just an ID and edit date and modified date. So every single table that we're going to create will have these fields. Okay, we'll always have some ID, and in a table we'll always have edit date, modified date. Okay, this will be kind of required. So the next thing is we have get all, which returns entities, and then we have get by ID. So depending on the type, yeah, it will return this method like enables it to return by ID an object. Okay, and it's still generic. It doesn't have a type. Okay, so so the next thing what we need to do is we need to go to startup, and then we're going to add these mappings, IAC mappings, yeah. And it doesn't know about iRepository, so I'm going to add this. Also, I'm going to go add these models. Okay. Now, are you happy? No, it's not happy. Why is that? So let's go ahead and read. It says, student cannot be used as a type parameter T in a generic type or method iRepository. There is no implicit reference conversion from student to repository base entity. Okay, so it needs to inherit from our base entity so we can map it into our repository. And then let's go ahead and see. Okay, this is our base entity. So we're going to go to our models, and we're going to say book inherit from base entity. To do that, you need to we need first to know that there is something called base entity, and then we may want to make this public partial class. Okay, good. Also, since we have an ID there, it says it will hide base entity ID. Use a new keyword if hiding was intended. Okay, so we need to be aware of that. Okay, so let's do the same thing for the loan, and we will do the same thing for the student, but since it inherits from the user, we'll do it for the user. So we'll say public partial base entity, and we need to have this. Okay, and for the student loan, yeah, let's go back and make it a repository public partial class loan. Okay, so we got our classes ready. If we go back to startup, now it's happy about them. Okay, so okay, so next we need to go to the controller. Now we can go to the controller, and then we can see that we have iLogger in our constructor, and then we're going to inject our these models, our repositories into this constructor also. So to do that, we need to, well, maybe we shouldn't do it in home controller because it will have some, let's say, some menu that will take us into books or loans. So instead, we're going to create our own controller called book controller, so which will be responsible for all the books. And then let's have it with these actions, read and write actions. So I'll just say add, and it will we will call it book controller. Say add. There you go. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to first create our properties. Okay, and we're going to have our constructor here. Okay, and include all these references also, repository, and models, Well, we don't. Do we need the logger? Sure, let's have that logger also. Okay. It's an extension of this Microsoft. Okay. So now we have our repository interface with a book type. Okay. Now we can call our repo book, which is our private property here, and let's call it from the index just for fun and see if it can get all the books. Okay, there you go. I'll just copy paste my snippet, so it basically gets all the books, and then we pass it to our view. And the next thing is we need to create, well, the first thing what we need to do is, probably since this is empty, we want to create our book. We want to have some create method for that, right? So and we have these methods. So what we will do is we'll just right click on it and then say add view, and it's going to have a razor view, and let's just say add. Okay, and we can pick a model, and it's going to be well, template, I mean create template, and then we need to create a model. We need to pick our model. It's going to be book model, and let's see if it will work. Hopefully it will not have some problems with that ID thing, that, you know, because it may get confused because of that integer ID that we have it in our entity and also in our model, if you guys remember. So I'll just say add and see what happens. So it's scaffolding it and building a project. Generating a code. Yeah, it created, so no problem. Okay, and we'll also create our list. We'll just say add view, razor view, so add, and we're going to have a list. It's going to be a book, and we'll just say add. And this is supposed to create a list of books. Oh, it didn't. Oh, yeah, it's complaining about this. All item with the same key has already been added key ID, so it doesn't like that ID. So I will have to deal with that. But before that, let me first at least get this create to work, because it was able to create this view, right? So I will copy paste my snippets for that, for this create method. Okay, so we will get some collection from the form, and then we will get each item from that collection, title to string, and the rest. We can go ahead with other ones like book, let's say ISBN, for instance, yeah, and then we'll go collection and ISBN. I will just convert it to the string. Okay, and then we just call insert, our insert method, which is, if you guys remember, well, this is the generic interface, but if you go to implementation, go to definition, oh sorry, let's go to implementation, then you will get to see that, you know, insert, what it does is just simply puts the date, time, edit date, modified date, becomes a now, and it adds the entity, and then saves changes. Okay, so to fix our ID stuff, let's go ahead, go to books, and then just comment out this ID and see what happens. Hopefully it will be happy about this, because the ID it's usually generated on the side of database, and we don't and in our model, since we have an ID already in our base entity, yeah, it's coming from base entity, we don't really need this ID here. So let's go ahead and try this. Now let's rebuild our solution, and then we'll try to add a view. Say add a view, razor view, add a list. Model class would be book. Say add. See if it will work. Yeah. Okay, this time it worked. It's happy. Okay. So, well, let's go ahead and try to run it. I'll just hit F5 and let's see. Okay, so this is our page, and we need to create our book. We need to go to, what was it? Book controller, and there was a create, wasn't it? Yeah, book and create. Wow, it is complaining about the entity type alone requires a primary key to be defined. Okay, so it needs a primary key. Yeah, let's take care of that. Well, okay, so let's remove this ID also. So this was a design error when we created our models. If we're getting from base entity which already has an ID, we don't want to have ID here also again, like it would be repetitive code, right? So I'm going to remove that, and then let's run it again. Okay, so let's give, wow, I have 2 IDs here generated, so no wonder why it was complaining. So I will say a book, Harry Potter, first edition, year was published 1972. I don't know about the category, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, this is the ISBN, and date, just the current date, whatever date it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit create, and we're going to debug it. So I'm going to hit F10, and I got my title, yes. So, and the next thing is we're going to insert, but we are getting some error. Okay, so if you look at the details, it says invalid column name, edit date, and modified date. Okay, so that means when we created our book, if you guys remember, we have created our migration and our table, our database, before we started inheriting from base entity. So our books, or loan, or user, they don't have modified date or create date fields. Okay, so they don't have these fields, but from the view we're trying to add those into our context. But okay, so I guess it's time to update our books table and our context, and we will go back again to our well, let's stop this, and then we'll go to tools, NuGet package manager, and package manager console. Okay, and we're going to create another migration, I guess. So this was our initial create migration, and we're going to create another one because we're inheriting from base entities. So if we create another one, then hopefully it will be happy. So let's go ahead and add migration, and we'll just say with modified date. Okay, was modified or create date. So let's go ahead and try that. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's say to Server Explorer. Okay, and then let's try to add these fields like manually. Probably it's not a good idea, but let's try it. So we'll just say this table, this shows the table, this shows table definition. So we'll open up our definition. Okay, and we're going to add these fields manually. So we need where was our entity? Let's open up a student. So it gets from this, it gets from this. So we need edit date and modify date. Yeah, so the edit date, and it's going to be date time, and we need modified date, and this is also going to be a date time. Okay, so if we say update, it will prepare some script, and let's click on update database, and it's updating it. So it updated it successfully. Okay, so let's see if it will work. Okay, so it's opened up, book create, some ID with some title. Okay, 1, 2, 3, edit date, some status. Let's say create. Let's see F10. Oh, again error. Base entity. Yeah, we have this fancy 64 integer here. So let's make it int. And then let's try it now. Okay, let's go to the book and create. Have these. Yeah, get that. And we're back to debugging. All right. This time it inserted, and our list is also working. So we have title, we have ISBN, we have ID, and status is reserved, and we have these edit and details. Okay, so our create works, our index works. Well, as a conclusion, what can I say? Well, you guys seen everything. So first I had a duplicate ID once I inherited from the base entity, and then I messed up my tables, my models, and my migration got messed up also. I had to create it again, well, which is okay. Like, we're not perfect. Like, you can always create multiple migrations and then update your models, your database tables and the fields. So you can even drop your database and then recreate it. Like, so, but I think if you are careful with this, like sometimes it works from the first try, and you don't have to recreate these things, multiple times. Okay, and I recommend you to be careful with also these types with integers, because sometimes it can be frustrating to search for them. So, but other than that, it's fun. And then we got our MVC working, and we're repository pattern working in MVC. And well, so far so good. Thank you. Bye bye.